27 minutes to 8 o'clock. Good morning. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. It's a situation room on Spice FM. My name is Eric Latif. We have Nduoko, Njeri, Thorne, CT Mugan. Joining us on the line now is Senator Ledama Olekina from Narok County. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Eric.
Karibu sana to the situation room.
Thank you very much.
Now, of course, we are discussing the issue that you raised on Friday or via your Twitter handle, and where you are talking about the recent appointments in public parastatals and public offices. Yes. So the Kenya Pipeline, yes. Kenya Power, Rural Electrification Authority, NTSA, and others.
Yes.
What's your beef?
I think it's about time that we implement the provisions of Article 10. 2A of the Constitution in terms of inclusivity. Eric, I'm an extremist when it comes to freedom and liberty. And particularly when you look at what has been going on in this country, it's as if some Kenyans are more Kenyans than others. You know, even in every community, there is an elite group which seems to be the ones in control of every single affair in this country. If you enter the energy sector, as an example, the Ministry of Energy, the PS is from one ethnic group. Most of the people who had the parastatal associated to that Ministry of Energy, like Kenya Power and Lighting, are from the same ethnic group. If you go to the petroleum sector, the Ministry of Petroleum and the PS is from one ethnic group. The chairperson of the Kenya Pipeline Corporation is from the same ethnic group. And then when you look at the board is comprised of 9 people. Out of 9, 5 of them are from the same ethnic group. We have 42 original ethnic groups in this country. I think a few others, about 4 others, have been recognized. If we are talking about inclusivity, which is something which is anchored in the Constitution, then we must practice it. We cannot preach water and drink wine. We have to ensure that every single part of this country is included in terms of leadership. We had about 88 people who applied for the job. We had the finalists were 3 people. There was one who was Maasai, another one was Luo, another one was Kikuyu. Looking at the gender, not even the gender, but the tribal balance in this country, there's no reason as to why Kenya Pipeline should not have considered even the current acting MD. The current acting MD is from Western Kenya. He's doing a fantastic job. He's a very disciplined civil servant who is out there to change that parastatal. But they didn't even consider him because the board chair, Mr. Ngumi, who has got a huge conflict of interest, having negotiated a 34 billion loan when he was head of investment, I think, banking in CFC Stanbic, and then having worked there, and then found his way to Kenya Pipeline, did not like him. He didn't like him because any time he wanted to influence a certain tender, the guy said, no, let us follow the procedure.
But let's stick to the issue, Senator. Let's stick to the issue. So 88 people applied. You're okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
9 people were shortlisted for the final interview. You're okay with that?
Actually, 3 people were shortlisted for the final interview.
No, the 3 were sent to the CS after.
Okay, 8 people were shortlisted for the final interview.
And then the 3 were sent to the CS.
Yes.
The CS considered, and he looked, well, the one who was leading in that interview process was the Kikuyu.
No. Let's go backwards a little bit. Let's look at the composition of the interviewees. The people who interviewed the 3 finalists or the 8 finalists. There were 9 of them, 5 of them from one ethnic group.
4 or 5?
9 of them. 4 voted. 1 was an alternate who was there. His name is Brian Muriuki, who is an alternate of the PS for petroleum. He was also the one asking questions. Having voted, 4 voted. Remember, there's an alternate. I'm a member of the energy committee in the Senate, so I understand the issue energy very, very well. There's an alternate for the PS in Treasury, and there's an alternate in the PS for petroleum.
Yes.
So the alternate for PS in petroleum was there. So there were 5 members of the board, 4 voted. You cannot expect to get justice when you have 4 people or 5 people from an ethnic group. In fact, what I would have expected is that if there is that conflict of interest, they should have actually, they should have sought services of a headhunter for them to be able to do that interview.
Right, Senator Olekina, I want to ask. There's the argument of the coincidence. It could be just a coincidence that the people who come up top are the ones who are most qualified. It just happens to be that selection was made on qualification as opposed to tribe. What would you say about that?
Absolutely not.
Do you have any evidence as to your assertions that it wasn't a coincidence? Do you have any evidence?
Let me put it this way. When you look at the issue of affirmative action in this Kenya, that in itself should be a ticker that there's no coincidence there. If you look at the way the industry is run, affirmative action is not even something which is considered. If you ask yourself, where are we getting most of the petroleum in this country? Okay? Even when you talk about the upstream, midstream, or downstream of the petroleum sector, go further, deeper, and look at the people who are suffering. They are the minorities. So it's not a coincidence that person came on top. Let us go back. Let us get into details. This same person had been appointed to serve in the Energy Regulatory Board. And then he was kicked out because of the conflict of interest. ERC went to court and they got him out. There's a serious conflict of interest there.
But that
so
doesn't
there's no way I am going to allow.
It doesn't negate from the fact that he could have been the best qualified.
No, he wasn't the best qualified.
How do you know this? How do you know he wasn't the best qualified?
He's been pushed.
What evidence do you have for your assertions? I mean, it could be wild conjecture. What evidence do you have for you to say this?
I've already given you a heads up that I serve in the energy sector, in the energy board, in the energy committee of the Senate. So I've got more insights of how that company
share these insights, please. What evidence do you have that these weren't the best qualified candidates?
If I tell you, let me put it this way. Today, my lawyers are putting together the documentation. We are going to stop this.
So you're going to court today?
We are proceeding to court today. There's some discoveries that we've got to carry out. We've got to, under Article 35 of the Constitution, we've got to call for certain evidence. We will use the most civil approach. If they refuse, then of course we'll demand it from the court.
There are those also who will argue that you are making so much noise about this particular one because one of the 3 finalists was a Maasai.
Absolutely. Why not? Why should we? We're not guests.
Well, that then skews your perspective.
And say that I would have wanted my Maasai person to get appointed.
I'll take that. I will take that with humility. I'll take that. But the Maasais are not guests in this country. The Turkanas are not guests in this country.
But nobody said they were. I think your perspective is somewhat skewed because you feel it is, because what you're saying is why didn't the Maasai get it, and what you're being told, actually the best person for the job got it. The most qualified person for the job got it.
But how is it that the best person who gets the job, according to him, is always from one community?
That is according to him. How many parastatals? There's over 100 parastatals in Kenya. You cannot from one incident go on to generalize. That is inductive reasoning, and it doesn't flow logically. For you to say that this is because it's Kikuyu, do you have evidence of that? Do you have evidence that it's not because of his qualifications?
Let's hear, Senator.
Let me tell you this. It is not a coincidence that the most lucrative parastatals are headed by one ethnic group. We cannot allow that. We cannot allow that. Let me put it this way. We had a very qualified acting MD of Kenya Power. He was treated like an outsider. He turned around that country, that company. He should have been given an opportunity to serve as it's not only about the Maasai.
Was he interviewed in the interview?
It is about Kenyans.
Was he interviewed in the selection?
It is about Kenyans who are sidelined, who should be given an opportunity to serve this country. There's this gentleman called Othieno, who worked as an acting MD for Kenya Power.
Yep.
He appeared before my committee about 4 times, and he presented very well his plan in terms of how he can change that company. Recently, the current MD of Kenya Power appeared before my committee, he was being protected from answering one question, a very simple question. I asked him a question on issues of meters versus tokens. He was protected by the CS, okay, and everyone else who was there, they did not want him to speak.
So, Mheshimiwa, are you saying that the interview processes in these situations were flawed?
Yes, they were.
And
yes,
how do you determine that they were flawed?
I'll put it this way. I have got some very good information on how this interview process came about and how the acting MD was mistreated because of his strictness. This is evidence that I'll present in court.
Is it something you can share with us?
You know, because I don't want this evidence to come out, I will present it in court. You know, without prejudice, so that I don't want a situation whereby someone can be able to use this evidence and say you went on Spice Radio and presented it. I will present it.
Senator,
I'll present this to the court.
You are paid by the taxpayer so that you're a senator in Kenya's parliament.
Absolutely.
And you sit, as you've said here, you sit in the Energy Committee.
Yes.
The people of Kenya have given you authority, they've given you mandate, and they've given you tools to use to ensure that such things don't happen. Why aren't you using those tools? Why are you going to court? Why haven't you raised this in the Senate?
Let me put it this way. A member of parliament or a member of the Senate in Kenya today is an ombudsman of the people. You have all avenues to be able to ensure justice and equity. And I will use all those avenues. I've not exhausted them. I am using the Senate. But because black is not black in Kenyan parliament, white is not white in Kenyan parliament, I've got to ensure that I pursue justice to the end. And I'll use all avenues which are available.
And that's all right. It's understandable.
Let me put it this
what I'm asking is,
when in the Senate,
you haven't used the avenue that you directly have in Senate. You haven't raised it as a question. You haven't asked a question. You haven't made a statement. You haven't brought in a motion.
This thing happened on Friday. The Senate doesn't sit on Friday. The Senate sits on Tuesday.
The
Can we ask
this
about
Tuesday,
appointment in Kenya Power happened in October.
You know, when it happened in October, I started gathering my information. And I said, let me give this Kenyan an opportunity. I even called the PS of Energy. And unfortunately, he is in Germany. And we spoke about it. I said, I want to understand what is going on.
Were you lobbying for your candidate, your Masai candidate, and calling him?
No, I never
Would you
lobbied.
consider
I'm
that
not interested
lobbying?
in that. You're asking me one question. Can I answer the first question before you jump into another question?
Sorry,
I'll be glad to answer your first question.
All right, go ahead.
Your gentleman, Eric, I think Eric Latif asked me a very simple question and said, why didn't you raise this thing in the first place? First of all, I spoke to the PS of Energy, a very respectable gentleman, Engineer Kamau, who I have a lot of respect for. When I spoke to him at that particular time, he told me, Senator, I'm unwell, but when I get back, let us have a conversation on this. Last week, when the current MD for Kenya Power appeared before me on the Senate committee, is when I looked at him and when I asked him a question and he was protected from answering that question, is when I said this person was not appointed because of merit. It is because of his tribal affiliation. Then when the thing that put the last nail in the coffin is when this skewed appointment at the Kenya petroleum sector happened. Then I said, you know what, this is not right.
Can I ask you, Senator, is this a sentiment that you bear alone, or speaking? I mean, you obviously have conversations with your colleagues outside of the Senate floor. Do you have these conversations, and is there consensus in terms of this sentiment, obviously, that you have?
You know, as a journalist who is active in the social media, I wouldn't expect you to ask me that question. This
Well, I mean, I have
sentiments which are shared by all Kenyans.
I'm
If you
asking
look at the way
because
Kenyans
we're talking
have
about
She's asking
I'm
about the
asking
Senate.
about the Senate. I'm talking about your colleagues.
you're asking about the
because
Senate,
you're
let
asking
me put it
because
this way.
Eric had asked previously about tools that you would essentially use apart from the court system to make sure that if you're looking at stopping these appointments, for example, or looking at further action. I'm talking about consensus from your colleagues in terms of agreements that they may have on this kind of a sentiment, because it's an important tool that you have in front of you to use. And if you don't have consensus amongst your colleagues, it might be a difficult route to use, looking at the tools that are before you.
I hear what you're asking, and let me put it this way. People are made different. There are those people who will be okay with the status quo because maybe of their background. If on the floor of the House, there are those people who believe in something, but because of their party memorandum, they may not be able to express. I'll give you a very good example.
Yep.
I sit in the Public Accounts and Investment Committee. We investigated the Ruaraka land report, and we pronounce ourselves, and we call for the prosecution of Matiang'i and the PS for education. Murkomen and all those people who are ranting today, who are pointing fingers at Matiang'i, were the people who voted against. But today they're saying we are threatening to bring it back. You must be principled. You must fight for what you believe in, whether it is right or wrong.
So you're saying the ground in the Senate keeps shifting?
Well, it shifts depending on maybe who is oiling your path or what is in it for you.
Okay.
What is in it for you? So for me, I put it this way. I was elected by the people of Kenya, and I owe my allegiance to them. You know,
I'd like to ask a question, if I may.
Proceed.
I want to take, let's presuppose that the committees or the boards that was elected to conduct the interviews were actually fair. That is the assumption. I'm beginning as a premise. Is it then possible that these people who eventually got appointed, is it actually possible that they could actually have been the best candidates?
You see, I would not be able to answer your question because of what I already see. You see, the board is already skewed. Let me give you a bit of my evidence that I have. The current CS of petroleum is treated as if he's a kid. He's not respected. No one give a hoot about his well-being. The guy was driving an old, dilapidated SUV that broke down. Well, his PS is driving a brand new SUV. You know, when he appears, he says, when he makes appointments, the PS overturn his appointments. They don't care about him. They don't respect him.
This is John Muñez you're talking about. John Muñez is a senior politician.
John Muñez appeared,
he hasn't made any complaints.
Listen, when he appeared before my committee, I shared the same sentiments. I told him, Bona PS, based on what is happening and the way you're responding to this thing, it appears you don't have any control of your docket. Your PS seems to be the most powerful person here. Let me, Eric, I don't. What I say to you, I will say to him, because when I do so, I have facts. We investigated various things, including the oil marketing scandals of insurance compensation.
I wanted to ask two questions.
We have.
I asked the first one. The second one I want to ask is this. If you look at the appointments that you speak of, do they number 10? Do they number 20? And it's against a backdrop of a population of Kikuyus who are, what? How many millions are there? Would we say that these appointments then are representative of a community? Because to use the numbers that we have and the logic that we have to more or less profile an entire community, because when you say Kikuyus, everybody who happens to come from that ethnic group will be filled into that particular bracket.
Profiled or immediately.
So would you say it is fair?
Eric, let me put this.
I am CT Muga. No, I'm CT Muga.
Muga. Sorry, you know, I don't have the liberty of seeing who I'm talking about.
I apologize. I should have introduced myself before I asked the question. My apologies.
No worries. Let me put it this way, and let me correct myself. I'm not profiling the Kikuyus. The Kikuyus are the most hardworking people you'll find in this Kenya. I am profiling an elite group. And when you follow through that elite, unfortunately, they all happen to come from one ethnic group. Okay? So I'm only profiling that elite. It's an issue where a small group decides that they will eat every single piece of cake that we have in this country. The people who suffer the most are the Kikuyus. So your question is not fair in the sense that it does not represent the people on the ground, the hard-working Kikuyus who are running around in Gikomba, in the markets, in the villages. It is a small elite group who decides that this is, let me put it this way. This is not the right forum for me to be able to provide you with all the evidence that I have on how Kenyans are being treated in terms of, resource mobilization, resource allocation.
Right. You have
it
a
is
forum
coming,
in the Senate, and
my friend. It is coming, and that's the forum that I'm going to be able to put that across.
Yes,
and
indeed.
If that forum is not black or white, as it's supposed to be, then I'll take it to the Wanjikos for them to understand what is happening.
We actually are very grateful for your presence, and we have this opportunity. That's why we keep asking the questions. But lastly, let me ask this question. There's a research, a randomized study that was done by a certain gentleman called Dr. Karani. And according to him, the public service jobs that you speak of, 48% of what is available is again from one community. But second is 33% from the community that the deputy president comes from. How is it that you do not mention that particular figure? Because if you do the maths, the percentage that's left for the rest of Kenya is something like 9% only.
I love your question because it is not right for those two communities to take every single piece of cake or every single job that is available in this country. I think it will only be fair if we are truly Kenyan. James Orengo, whom I respect so much, my leader in the House, said during the BBI launch that this is the first time that all Kenyans are in one tent. Okay? I would love to see that as a reality out there with all the jobs.
Translated to the ground.
Okay? I would want to see it translated.
Just a few.
When it comes to resource allocation, I would want us to find a position whereby we are narrowing the gap between the rich and the poor. It is so sad, I can tell you that.
We have about 3 minutes, Senator, so let's just take one final question from Njeri.
A number of questions, actually. First of all, you mentioned that the board had 5 Kikuyu directors. I just wanted to correct you. It's only 4. The others consist of 2 Kalenjins, 1 Samburu, 1 Luo, and 1 Luya. And also, it's important I highlight
of it is those. Not true. No, don't correct me. I'll tell you. There is an alternate director who is Kikuyu. No, let us be factual here.
There are 9 directors, 4 of which are Kikuyus. There is 2 Kalenjins, 1 Samburu, 1 Luo, and 1 Luya. Now, 8
There's an alternate director who is an alternate director. His name is Brian Morioki. I'll give you the name.
Is he a director? He's an alternate
director.
Was he involved?
He's an alternate director.
Yes. In the Irungu? Because
he sat in the interviews and he was interviewing the process.
The other thing I wanted to point out is the board's role actually ends once they've submitted the names to the CS. So once they submitted the 3 names, the boards had nothing more to do with it.
But
it's important to note that. And the other thing I wanted to point out is the legislative process was followed here. It's auditable. All records are available to anybody. And the process was followed.
I am so as opposed to going on Twitter. Saying that, No, actually, I'm so glad that you're saying that all those records are available. It seems that you have a copy of those records. Please present them to me. I'll use them in court. I don't need to go through an expensive way. You're speaking as Steve. You're speaking as Steve. You've got the evidence with you that you're saying all the evidence is available for everyone.
They're auditable and available. Auditable and
please
available.
Please publish it. Are you holding brief for them?
And no, I'm not holding brief. I think it's information.
From your presentation,
no.
And your submission is like you're holding brief for them.
No, I think I've come up with facts that we were overlooking previously. I think your assertion that
those
there's
are
5
facts.
Kikuyus was wrong.
I believe
there's only 4 Kikuyus on that board. Right? There's only 4 Kikuyus on that board. There are 4 Kikuyus. There's 9 members of that board.
Senator, as we wind up, Senator, let's agree on some things.
One thing.
So the extra person that you're calling Kikuyu is an alternate board member. The board member is
an alternate board member.
Wahome Gitonga, Winnie Mukami,
Yes.
P.S. Andrew
No, the
Kamau,
more.
and John Gumi.
Epe.
Those are the four.
Those are
No,
the
no, no.
four.
But
There's
Eric,
four
this
Kikuyus.
gentleman
And
was
then-
present at that interview.
And then the fifth one is the
Wait.
alternate board
He
member.
was present at that interview.
He is
Not-
not. He
he
is
was
not a
carrying-
board member.
not
You've
carrying
got
a vote.
nine
He's an
nine
alternate
board
director.
members.
But does he have a vote?
Eight of those board
Listen.
members actually marked Irungu first, and the ninth board member marked him second. How can you then say this is Kikuyu based and not competency based? 8 of those members marked him first. Do we want the merit or do we want the tribe in place? We've got to be very careful as Kenyans.
Present those facts because you're holding brief for Kenya Pipeline. Present those facts.
All right, so let's do this.
Present the facts.
Let's wait for you to actually present your
Let us
case
know.
in court
You know,
tomorrow.
when you go on Spice FM, which I believe is a very powerful radio station in this country, when you hold brief for a company, present the facts because you just said it. This is what you said. You're ignoring the fact that there's an alternate director who sat in that interview and interviewed. That's number one.
And now we
Did
do.
he mark
two,
Irungu? Did he mark Irungu?
You are also, that's neither here nor there.
It's very
He was an
important. He did
alternate,
not
he
mark Irungu.
influenced.
You
He
can't discard
influenced
that
it.
piece of
So
information. He
because
did
you're
not mark
holding
Irungu.
brief,
I'm not
because
holding
you're
brief.
holding
These are
brief.
questions
Yes,
we need
you
to
are.
ask.
You're
You're
holding
making
brief.
assertions and
Jerry,
statements.
Jerry,
You are
Senator,
holding brief.
I've got. We're getting to the top of the hour.
Let
Senator,
me tell you,
Senator,
I think
want
also one thing that betrays you is your last name. So
My
you
last name
defend
is an
them to the
English
latter.
name. My last name is Thorne. It's a British name. How does that
Senator-
betray me?
Senator-
Senator,
Okay.
Asante Sana. Thank you very much for calling in this morning. Thank you for taking our call this morning. Of course,
Karibu.
we'll have this conversation once
Let's
we take it to
let's
court.
call a spade a spade.
Thank you, Senator.
That's
Asante.
the best thing, Eric.
Thank you, Senator.
Asante Sana. Have a good day. It's the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We have talked with one guest, that's Senator Ledama Olekina. In the next hour, we'll be having Kamodwa Iganjo, constitutional lawyer. He'll be telling us about the BBI versus Constitution of Kenya 2010. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.